Moving now to formally opening the session. Good morning. My name is Rowena Bethel. I'm a member of the United Nations Committee of Experts in Public Administration, and I'm your moderator for this session 4, which will examine how ICT's information and communications technologies may be mobilized for delivering on the SDGs and the SAMOA pathway. This session is actually organized into 2 roundtables for the first half of the day. The first of the roundtables will address innovative ICT policies and strategies, the journey into innovative ideas to mobilize ICT for delivering on the SDGs and the SAMOA pathway. The second roundtable, which will occur after the first morning break, will look more closely at the role of ICT in mobilizing resources and leaving no one behind. We have a dynamic expert team of speakers for both panels. The United Nations General Assembly's World Summit on Information Society +10 resolution recognized that information and communications technologies are contributing to higher levels of social benefit and inclusion, providing new channels among citizens, businesses, and governments to share and augment knowledge as well as participate in decisions that affect their lives and work. The Broadband Commission has characterized ICTs as capable of moving the world from a digital revolution to a development revolution through their role in moving the internationally agreed development goals from vision to action. It is this very ability to move the world from vision to action in respect of the SDGs which distinguishes the importance of ICT in the public administration sustainability agenda. The SDGs, though with a simple objective, present such a level of complexity for administration that ICTs are absolutely essential to meet the expected outcomes, particularly within the stipulated time frame, the 2030 deadline. ICTs are absolutely needed to achieve the depth of transformation required by the SDGs. I am now pleased to introduce our panelists for this first roundtable, which will provide a cross-spectrum of national perspectives and experience. First of all, we have Miss Dorcas Tan, Director, Strategic Planning and International Government Technology Agency of Singapore. Dr. Raymond Wells, Senior Deputy Director of Information Technology at the National Insurance Board of the Bahamas. Mr. Sim Sikut, the Digital Policy Advisor, Government Office of Estonia. And Ms. Hunjin Byun, Executive Principal, Department of E-Government, Republic of Korea. The panelists will make presentations roughly between 8 and 10 minutes. We are running over time with our start, so I'm going to implore them once again to remain within that time frame. That's extremely important. And in doing so also, they will be looking at the guiding questions for this roundtable, which 3 guiding questions have identified. And they are for which SDG targets and SAMOA pathway commitments can ICTs best accelerate implementation? Secondly, what innovative policies and strategies have worked for deploying ICTs for realizing the SDGs? And finally, how can governments mobilize the private sector, partnerships and cooperation for mobilizing ICTs, including e-government, for sustainable development? And with that brief introduction, I would now invite Dorcas, Ms. Dorcas Tan from Singapore, to make her presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Dorcas from the Government Technology of Singapore. It's my honor and privilege to be here to share with you Singapore's digital journey towards a smart nation. As with many countries, Singapore believes that ICT is a key enabler to help deliver the 2030 agenda as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. Besides the fact that ICT is a key driver for economic growth and productivity, we believe that digitalization allows us to be more inclusive as we are better able to crowdsource feedback, inputs, and involve our citizens in public policy, involving them in the delivery of public services. I will elaborate more in the subsequent slides. Before I start, I thought I'd share with you some key statistics of Singapore. Singapore is located in Southeast Asia with a land area of 719 square kilometers, with a population of 5.54 million. As you can tell from the statistics, that Singapore is densely populated, and we are facing with aging population situation. So we are constantly looking for solutions that help us solve some of the urban challenges that we are facing as a country. And we see some opportunity to leverage on technology to do so. Let me share with you briefly our digital journey over the past few years and some key observations. Throughout our digital journey, we saw that leadership is key in driving transformation throughout the country. You see, our digitalization journey started more than 35 years ago with the civil service computerization program, with the aim to put a computer on every desk. Way back in 1980, the civil service was a very paper-based organization, so it requires significant mindset shift to actually use the computer. So taking a lead in this effort was our founding Prime Minister, the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who took upon himself to actually use the computer to send email to the whole entire civil service so that the entire civil service has no choice but to correspond to him using the computer. At the turn of the century in year 2000, we saw the internet was very prevalent, and we saw the opportunity to actually deliver government services via the internet. And taking the lead is none other than by our head of civil service, who said that all government services should go digital by default. And if you are unable to do so, you need to personally go to him and explain why you can't do so. And as a result, we have managed to actually bring about more than 90% of services online, translating to about 1,600 e-services. In year 2000, we saw the mobile penetration rate in Singapore increasing significantly, and to date, mobile penetration rate is about 150%, which means that on average, each Singaporean has 1.5 mobile phones. We saw opportunity to actually deliver government services again through mobile devices, and during this period, we actually rolled out, developed more than 300 mobile services as a result. In 2011, we launched the eGov 2050 Master Plan, where when the first notion of citizen centricity was first mooted, we recognized as a government that we do not know everything of the citizens, and therefore it's important to actually involve the citizens in the design as well as the delivery of the public services. So there's a mindset shift here that from government to you to a government with you as we work closely with the citizens to deliver some of the services. In 2014, our Prime Minister as well as President delivered speeches outlining the Smart Nation vision. Essentially, Smart Nation vision focused on what we can harness technology and data to provide better services to our citizens. When we did a word cloud on the two speeches by the President as well as the Prime Minister, one keyword stood out, and that's people. So many people actually associate Smart Nation or digital government with new technology, but we realize that we can only be successful in Smart Nation. We can do something that benefits our citizens, and it becomes clear that we need to focus on the problems that citizens face and, where possible, use technology and data to help them solve the problem more effectively. There are three key main thrusts of Smart Nation. First is the digital government, where we talk about delivering government digital services to citizens. And our desired outcome is that we are better able to anticipate the needs of the citizens better, and we provide more integrated suite of digital service that revolves around the lives of the citizens. We're going to do focus group discussion, and one of the key insights that came back was that citizens often do not know which government agency to go to when transacting with government, but they prefer one single point of contact and to deal with foreign government. Taking account of that feedback, our strategy is actually to build a digital platform where it becomes a common interface between the citizens and the government, where citizens will transact with government through this platform. At the back end, we collect data, relevant data points of the citizens, perform analytics and machine learning to derive insights of the citizens, and so that we can anticipate their needs much better. We're also experimenting with newer technologies such as artificial intelligence in the form of chatbots, such as citizens do not have to go to a website and search for information, but they could actually key in some of the questions via chatbot and get the reply through the chatbot. The second key thrust of the Smart Nation is what we call the smart city systems, where essentially it's about putting in place technology and infrastructure to operate the smart city. With the limited land area that Singapore is facing, we are at a point that we cannot continue to build ourselves out of a problem. What I mean is that we cannot continue to build like more roads or more train lines just to solve a traffic problem. So some of the key questions that we're actually asking ourselves is how do we use technology and data to optimize the resources that we have? How do we use technology and data to solve the problems with current resources that we have? The third key thrust is what we call the smart citizen involvement, where we want to enable citizens, be it individuals, businesses, or public officers, to create useful application for themselves. We used to think as a government that we need to solve all the problems for the citizens, but increasingly we find that it's impossible because there's a limit to which the public sector could grow in size. So therefore, we are looking at ways of how we can actually leverage on building communities, involving citizens to help us so that government can partner with citizens to solve the problems together. And technology has enabled us to do so, that enable us to connect with citizens, to build digital communities so that we can solve problems together. I will elaborate more in the subsequent slides. So one example of citizen centricity is about simplifying services for our citizens. In Singapore, citizens often do not know which agency to go to when they approach municipal issues. So if you can see with the pictures on the slide, that one small area such as this, there are actually 5 government agencies that they need to deal with if depending on where the issues lies. For example, for the footpath, they have to go to the National Agency, Environment Agency. If the problem lies in the state land, they have to go to the Singapore Land Authority. Or if it's with the park connector, if it's with the national parks. Even as a career civil servant myself, I do not know which government agency to go to, let alone as citizens. So we thought that rather than citizens have to worry about each agency they have to approach, we come up with what we call the One Service app, where we allow citizens to report all municipal services. So the citizens can actually download this app, sign in with our digital ID called the SingPass, and then you can find the icons of the different municipal issues that they can report. You can see on the screen. Click on this icon, take a picture, make some comment, and then click send. And there's a rule-based engine in the back end to route the case to the relevant agency, and the citizens will be updated of the status of the issue reported until the case is closed. An example of optimization, as I mentioned earlier, that we have reached a point that is due to the land scarcity, we are not possible to continue building. So we are looking at how to leverage technology and data to do better urban planning. And so I'll give you an example in terms of transport planning. In Singapore, we are very privileged to have many transport data. So for each citizens, we actually use an EasyLink card to tap in and out when we use the public transport. So every time the citizen does that, we have data of the time where they bought, time they alight, the duration of the travel, and location as well. And using this data, we actually could generate hotspots where citizens get on and off the public transport, and we can do proper transport planning, especially during peak hours. With this data, we can analyze whether there's a sizable group of people traveling from, say, point A to point B during peak hours, and we then use this data and approach bus operators, and with evidence to say that there's a business case for you to actually provide direct bus routes during peak hours. And this is the thinking behind one of our initiative called the B line, where we take the inspiration of a bee flying from point A to point B, not stopping anywhere. And this app allows us to actually optimize our bus services significantly. And the other advantage of this app is that it allows citizens to crowdsource the routes and suggest new routes. So the routes are dynamics, right, and it may change, but the data that we collect are important, and this data help us to make transport planning more efficient and user experience much smoother. Lastly, I'll talk about the ideas of community, of building digital community, and we'll be using an example called the My Responder app. So in Singapore, sometimes with traffic, it takes a while for the emergency service to reach to a patient who has a cardiac arrest, let's say in the park. And statistics has shown that for every second after a person had a heart attack, if we are able to render help within the first 10 minutes, it will significantly improve the chance of survival for that patient. So we work closely with the Singapore Civil Defence, which is the paramedics, to build a mobile app where citizens who are first aid trained can subscribe to this app. And this app will then allow all first aiders within a vicinity of 400 meters where a cardiac arrest or incident has happened as soon as it was reported. And this helped to provide support in crucial minutes before the ambulance arrived, dramatically improving someone's chance of survival. And within this app, a user can actually dial 995, the emergency line in Singapore, and it provides an automatic GPS location to the emergency operator, ensuring that they can accurately send the ambulance to the right location. You see, sometimes when people are panicking, they tend to give the wrong address. And with this GPS location, you can double confirm where the exact location would be. So how, instead of having more ambulance and having to train more paramedics, with this app, we have managed to garner more than 10,000 first responder within a few months and to respond to cases. And this has helped us to build a virtual community of lifesavers and save many lives. This is the power of what we call a digital community and how we can use technology to bring citizens and government together to solve a problem. With the experience of building the My Responder app, we have also we actually managed to extend it to other domain areas. Citizens can now give feedbacks such as for road defects, environmental issues, workplace safety. They also can respond to appeals for information for suspect and missing people, and even suggest a book to the public, such that the public library could go by the appropriate book that citizens want. Another area that we talk about would be the Open Data Initiative. It essentially is to put up data for the public to use. So our strategy is not to use to put as many data as possible, but to put up useful data. So what happened in the past that we used to put many data, but we tracked the downloads that not all the data are well utilized. So what we did was we removed those less well utilized data and put up those that are just used more frequently. And we try to make the government data relevant and understandable, but through charts and through blogs where how data can be used for public policy making. We also have developed portals with APIs, which is a one-stop access to real-time APIs from different government agencies. Another strategy that we have is actually putting on platform for co-sourcing. And we have what we call the GovRide, where developers within the government can post tasks such that people outside of the government, be it individuals, students, or even freelancers, could actually bid for tasks and co-create solutions with the government. We recognize that not everyone is digital savvy, so to bridge the digital divide, we have a series of digital inclusion initiatives targeted at various groups, including elderly, lower income, and people with disability. We are grateful that we are recognized internationally and as well as, more importantly, locally, that our citizens actually more than 95% of our citizens and businesses are satisfied with the quality of e-government services that Singapore government provides. And lastly, I thought I would end off with what assistance that Singapore could help. Having benefited from the external assistance, we believe that we should also pay it forward. So we have the Singapore Cooperation Enterprise, which is the focal point of access to Singapore public sector expertise. We have presence over 30 countries in key areas. In the area of e-government, SCE provides advisory and technical expertise to implement e-government services to improve efficiency in government services. You can actually look up the information on this URL, or you can approach me later and I will help you to link up to the right people in Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dorcas, for that excellent presentation. I think what impressed me most were two things in your presentation. The fact that you have very strong leadership around the use of ICTs at the very highest level that encourages citizens to become more involved in government so that you have government by the people as opposed to government for the people. And secondly, the fact that citizens have such an array of opportunities to help to form policy and to influence planning and policy. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. We're now going to move to Dr. Raymond Wells, who will provide a presentation with respect to aspects of the Bahamas. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to start by thanking the United Nations for putting on such an important initiative. Innovative ICT policies and strategies is important for small island developing nations like the Bahamas. I would like to propose a case, if you like, on change within the Bahamas, a small island developing nation that was actually impacted by what is believed to be climate change. The Bahamas has been faced with significant challenges over the past several years, with an increase in intensity of hurricanes that is postulated by experts to have been a result of climate change. In 2015, Hurricane Joaquin devastated the islands of the southern Bahamas, resulting in major damages to homes, crop properties, and ICT infrastructures. In 2016, a Category 6 Hurricane Matthew significantly impacted the more densely populated islands of the northern Bahamas, also devastating homes, properties, and ICT infrastructures, including many of the Bahamas' government's critical ICT infrastructures. This monster storm caused major outages that in some cases lasted weeks and placed a significant strain on the country's ICT infrastructure. The Bahamas has taken an approach in its ICT contingency strategy that all government data must be stored within the Bahamas' border. Given the maturity of the technology within the Bahamas, there are only few islands with the requisite ICT infrastructure to allow for the co-location of data between the production site in New Providence and its disaster recovery site. The most likely Bahamian island to act as a disaster recovery site is Grand Bahama, which is some 130 miles north of us. An analysis of the path of Hurricane Matthew will show that New Providence and Grand Bahama were severely impacted by the path of that major storm. As such, a serious rethinking of the current placement of data approach is needed, given that critical government data needs to be highly available. In order for the Bahamas and other states faced with similar natural disaster perils to have highly available critical data, there needs to be a new approach to protecting critical data. Given the size and availability of ICT resources, it is difficult to develop standards that impact every facet of an ICT landscape in small island developing nations. It may be important for states to adopt existing proven standards. For instance, the United States National Standards of Technology, or NIST, offers states like the Bahamas an excellent and inexpensive way to adopt standards for needed ICT critical data policies. An example is the NIST 800-34 that proposes a standard for contingency planning for federal information system and offers a starting point for ICT policy development for states that are faced with potential massive natural disaster that impacts a country nationwide. For instance, standard policy within this framework speaks to having a separation between a disaster recovery site and production sites that are not faced by the same perils. As I mentioned before, the Bahamas was significantly impacted by Hurricane Matthew, where both the production site in New Providence and the disaster recovery site in Grand Bahama were both impacted at the same time. Additionally, given that states, including the Bahamas, is faced with potential for cyber attacks that could potentially bring down the country's ICT or the government's ICT critical data, there needs to be approached how critical data stays both protected and readily available to its citizenry. This framework for improving critical infrastructure, cybersecurity encourages organizations and governments outside of the United States and frameworks to develop a common language for international cooperation on critical infrastructure on cybersecurity. One of the key components of the framework includes to protect, which outlines some of the major areas to develop and implement safeguards to ensure delivery of critical infrastructure services. Another outcome of the policy could be to ensure that there are significant protective technologies to ensure that data is always online and resilient. A proposed solution to critical information protection in small island development state is the development of strong ICT disaster recovery processes to minimize risk for critical government system. And the approach needs to be outlined, and the approach as outlined starts with co-locate data in various embassies. A less expensive approach could be to develop an ICT infrastructure within SIDS corresponding embassies. Many embassies abroad can be enhanced from a physical security standpoint to house an ICT infrastructure for their corresponding countries. This will allow the country to maintain physical control and ownership of their physical ICT processing plans under established diplomatic arrangements that may already exist. If SIDS decides to embark on such an undertaking, there could be needs to establish international sovereign data agreements so that sovereignty information placed in other countries are left free from interception by other governments. Access to critical information needs to be established to protect data in a similar fashion as diplomats are protected. The use of an efficient and mature technology such as geo-clustering, geo-IP addressing, replication to co-locate it and access to data in real time is needed and can easily be implemented. Models can be built to allow critical data to be highly available automatically if the primary sites in the SIDS fail for any period of time. Finally, critical information will not be protected and may not be available if SIDS fail to follow strong standards on information protection. I would like to address quickly some of the guiding questions that we were asked. The most critical one of the questions that I believe is pertinent to the Bahamas, although I answered all, was the e-integration or the development of an e-integration strategy that could be led by a possibly led by a public-private partnership. Currently, within the Bahamas, the government has undertaken significantly to build a lot of systems within the various government departments, but these systems are significantly siloed. And I believe my colleague from Estonia would talk about an e-integration strategy, but there's a strong need for integration between government systems so that the wastage of building each system is avoided. I believe that that approach will significantly enhance the revenue generation of small island development states. And I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wells. I think it's important to just re-emphasize very quickly the point raised regarding the cybersecurity. Very, very important. And it's interesting because Dr. Wells and I had a discussion prior to the major hurricanes 4 years ago. And he had raised the same issues with me. He and I actually worked together in the same institution. And I never imagined, my position essentially is with greater concern regarding the security of the data and its availability and the sovereign protections. I said to him that I did not think that Nassau and Grand Bahama would be hit by the same storm. And sure enough, 3 years later, he was proven right. It did happen. So I think it's vitally important for SIDS to begin to look at how we protect these critical information infrastructures and the data that keep government going when we're faced with these sorts of vulnerabilities that cover the entire geographical footprint of our various countries. So thank you very much, Dr. Wells. And of course, the issue of integration, which is extremely important. Multiple information systems is enormously expensive. The idea behind leveraging technology is to simplify processes and to simplify the citizens' ability to interact with government. When multiple systems exist, it doesn't solve the problem. I think in some cases it aggravates it. So I thank you very much for that expose, Dr. Wells. I will now invite Mr. Sim Sikut from Estonia. to give his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. Well, usually it's this way that when you come from Estonia to an event, you have come the longest way, but I quite understand this is not the case today, so it's a special time for me in that sense. Many of you have come even longer. But thank you to the government of Bahamas, and thank you to the United Nations for inviting me and having us over. I work as the digital policy advisor to the Prime Minister and thus the government of Estonia, and the reason I guess we are here is that we have been trying to make the most from digital technology for our development ever since the late 90s, so for the last 20 years. And it has reached this point where sometimes mockingly my country is called e-Estonia, in a sense that exactly doing things digitally, embracing technology has really sort of penetrated all walks of life, all different policy sectors and all aspects of everyday citizens. I'll share a few sort of lessons that we think we have learned along the way and proposals that say where to go from there really. But starting with my slides. A few just words that say where do I come from? So Estonia is a small country up there north in Europe. So with 1.3 million people only, with not that much natural resources, but still with a very open economy, our challenge has always been how do you pull that off? How do you pull off being a fully fledged country with a strong defense, Nordic-style welfare state, and the whole spiel? So for us, the attempt and the answer really for the last 20 years has been, let's make the most of technology for that. We first started with experimenting because mind you, middle of 90s or late 90s, that's the time when internet's just taking off, right? Just starting to go to masses. And what came out of these experiments was that, well, it really works. So from there, it actually has become a conscious strategy and led strongly by the Prime Minister, my boss, because of that, because it's really, we see that the impact that ICT brings to development goes through all different sectors of policy. Or if you put it in today's discussion context, it really is something that could enable development when it comes to all SDGs. Our main sort of experience really comes from, so if I had to summarize to one sort of aspect, what does that mean? What has the biggest sort of benefit of IT really been and how has it worked in Estonia? Is that using IT has enabled us to be really effective as a government and also greatly enabled the whole economy to grow and be more effective as well. And I'll share a few examples. Basically, whatever you need to do with the government in Estonia, in your private life, in your corporate life, as a government official, you can do that digitally with the help of exactly online tools. So whether it's any application to your government, whether it's something exactly that you need to get done, you go online for that or use a mobile phone. You use a mobile to track how your kid is doing in school. If you go to doctor, there's a national health record. So basically you can have the medical history ready for you and your treatment potentially be much more efficient. Even all the way to if we vote, we do that online. So if I vote for the parliament, I could do it right here from the Bahamas if it was elections time. Now the whole point here is that we have really taken a hard look how to economize on the resources we have, the little resources we gather as a government. So that, first of all, of course, affects the back office. We all know this. But even more importantly, really the front office of public service delivery. And I think this is really the key when it comes to SDGs as well. So whatever goal we look at the core of it is that we have to deliver strong and efficiently on the policies and services we put out there. And really doing it digitally, going to digital channels is a way for that. Especially we see that in how to boost the economy, how to enable economic growth. So the reason I have these gentlemen up on the screen is that we do love to go to sauna. So we don't have the benefit of warm climates, so we really like to have the warm inside the, in the house. Well, the point is, you could be right there with your buddies and you could start a company right there. In the next few hours, at most, it's legally up and running. After you have your company up and running, all the rest of the red tape, all the reports you have to do, all the declarations and all the sort of things you have government makes you do, you can handle online again. And so the whole point is that we have really used digital tools to get away from private sector growth, to really bring red tape and bureaucracy to the minimum, all to the point that it would be very easy to start a company and run it with the hope that then there's more of it in whatever walks of life and field. And so the outcome is that, yes, we do have a very active startup scene. And these guys clearly say this is one of the reasons they're in Estonia, because it's easy to do business there. And we also have quite a lot of evidence from the government of efficiency side. So for example, if we look at OECD countries, then because of using digital tools a lot, We are proud to say that our health and tax systems, for example, are the most effective ones when we compare the outcomes in the field as opposed to the resources we have to put in. And again, for a small country, that's a massive thing. If I point to the main lesson we have learned in the process, how to make that all happen, is that we see that the key role and our key small success story that we stumbled upon was that we put in place strong platforms for digitization early on. And the two core things that really have benefited us, one, digital identity for the whole country. So everyone in Estonia has to have a smart ID card and can also have an equivalent mobile ID to use any services securely online, as well as sign anything digitally. So signing is especially important because think about all the signatures you have to keep in your life. Or you have to go to some office to exactly present some papers and things. With a digital signature, you don't have to do that. You can get anything done from a distance. The full cycle of any service can happen digitally. So that's why we say in Estonia, and the only things you cannot do digitally is, high-risk things like getting married. You still have to show up for that. But we want to make sure you really know what you're doing. Divorced, you can get online, so. But that's a different story. Now, so my whole point is this, that yes, something like a digital ID, so having a secure way to have a transaction between the provider and the user greatly enables the range of things we can bring online. Now, secondly, what we really benefited from is what we call X-Road, but it's a government or nationwide data exchange platform. Basically, any service usually needs to push data or pull some data to be effective, right? Especially if we talk about one-stop shops and seamless services and, allowing citizens to get things done very efficiently at once. For that, we need to exchange data. Our solution was that let's have a joint platform for that. We were basically just too poor to build up siloed infrastructure and siloed IT systems. We thought we have to make them interoperable from the start. That's the only way we can afford to have a digital country. And that's how it has worked. So these sort of infrastructures, really what I meant is that, from policy sector to policy sector, service to service, as the platforms are there, people don't need to reinvent these wheels. So they can greatly just focus on the core of their business area or service innovation and just use these as a building block. And actually not just in the government. Digital signatures are the heaviest used in the private sector in B2B transactions. Any contracts that business people are making or any sort of employee and employer contracts the same way. And similarly, X-Road for data exchange, let's say our whole smart grid, which is private to private companies exchanging electricity data, is built on that too. So basically the platforms we put out there as government actually work for the whole society and allow the whole society to become digital as well. I'll skip a slide, but what I wanted to really sort of come to is that what we have really felt through that is that I guess what gets echoed in all these type of events is that at the end of the day, what's really the success story behind digitalization is the transformation we make, right? So it's not the technology. Technology is the same everywhere, but it's how we use it, how we choose to redo how we operate is what makes a difference. And now that's easier said than done, of course. Leadership takes it a long way, just like exactly you mentioned about Singapore, and we've seen in many other countries, we've had the same lack of leadership. You see our cabinet in session on the picture. These guys have been working paperless since '99, exactly for the reason that there was leadership who said, look, if we want the whole of country and society to use technology for the best, we have to show the way as ministers. But my point here is also this, that what we greatly in Estonia benefited from was learning from others. And really to the point that we had some assistance in building up our administrative capacity, as well as the benefit of some solutions that other countries had built up. And this is what we really see that if we talk about how to go forward, we think there should be more of this sharing happening. All of our solutions, most of our solutions in Estonia, they are open sourcely available to use for anyone in the world. We give back in a way. We send our experts around the world to basically work on different sort of capacity buildings. But I think my bottom line is this, if I have to end with a sort of statement of political sense, we should really be sharing and building capacity more, investing into this much, much more for the benefit of SDGs. Of course, Estonian experts are happy to help in this. We already have experience basically from 60 countries around the world where you can find either our solutions or experts in use. But again, that's 60 out of the 200, or if not more, right? And it's not just Estonians. Whatever works this is what you could be sharing and learning more. So I will end here, but I'll be happy to exactly get a few questions afterwards. And like I said, Estonians are always happy to share what has worked for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sim. I'm deeply impressed with the Estonian model. I had the benefit of being exposed to much of their work about 2 years ago, along with 1 year ago with Dr. Wells. And certainly I think there are lessons that the Bahamas can learn from that experience. And I'm pleased that you were able to attend this session so that our policymakers and our government officials can see that a country that really was quite poor was able to utilize technology essentially to move very far up in terms of its economy, its development, and also its ability to provide services globally. So thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is Hyunjin from Korea. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Hyunjin and working for National Information Society Agency in the Republic of Korea. It's great honor of me to introduce in Korea case how we mobilize ICT to develop the economy and society. I think the reason I was invited for this conference is that Korea is one of the countries that where mobilizing ICT in its economy and social developments. The key success factors, I think, in Korea's success is that there is 3 things. One is that there is a high level commitment on ICT, and also there is the cross-governmental approach for the developing the ICT services for governments. And the other is also partnership with civil society and global organization and others. It's pretty much similar to what we discussed last 2 days, and I think if we don't have those kind of three success factors, that I think cannot mobilize anything. Like even though it has the most powerful mechanism to bolster our missions, like SDG and 2030 and SAMOA pathway. My presentation today consists of 2 parts. For the first part is the Korea government's approach to assess ICT competency of government officials. And the other part is what kind of global ICT partnership we are having now to mobilize ICT and e-government for sustainable development. Here, the ICT competency means that ability to solve the problem and enhance organizational performance by using ICT in workplace. And there are some many different types of assessment according to what to assess. In this framework, we assess the individual ability of the using ICT, not assessing the country level, like e-government development index or organizational level of ICT use. There are two sides of competency building. One is how to assess ICT competency, and the other is how to train them accordingly. In Korea, there are 2 different government bodies are involved in each side. One is the Ministry of Interior for assessment, and the other is the Ministry of Personnel Management for training. The ICT competency assessment for government officers have improved from ICT skill assessment in 2005 to the ICT competency assessment framework in 2011. Though several times of pilot tests and reflect and adjusted current level of government officers' competencies and the desired level. The assessment is conducted in form of the internet-based test on the web. The behaviorally anchored rating scale called the bars is used for assessment. There are 2 types of assessment. One is for general government officers, and the other is for ICT-related officers. Each task consists of the 50 minutes long questionnaires, and thus ICT-related officers can take 2 tests both, and thus takes whole 30 minutes as whole. All government officers, regardless of their job position, are required to have the common ICT competency would be categorized into 3 levels: understanding of ICT and ICT news and ICT leadership, which can be further broken down into 10 competency types and 40 assessment elements. And the understanding of ICT category, national agenda for ICT development, or political propaganda such as Government 3.0 are also included as well. New technological developments like big data, cloud computing are also included for assessments for the government officers' level of awareness, their concepts. The other one is the job-based ICT competency, job-based ICT competence, which defines the 10 competency types and 61 elements, which include system operation, job database, security, project management, and so on. This competency assessment helps individuals determine which set of competencies they need to develop, check guidelines for developing individuals' ICT competency, and prioritize area of education. Individual public officers can use these reports to establish their ICT education plan. As for managerial level, this helps for them to find out the competency they need to develop for their working staffs, checking guidelines for coaching and encouraging the staff, and prioritize area of the education. This approach for Korea ICT competency assessment framework seems to be a simple start for diagnosing ICT competency of your government officers and leveraging ICT for their economic and social development by assessing the level of ICT news. Because this model is designed for Korean government officers reflecting current political emphasis and technological trends, it would be also good that a good approach that says country develops their ICT competency assessment framework reflecting your government emphasis on ICT, like as in the listed on SDGs or SAMOA pathway. The second part of my presentation about the Korea's ICT Global Partnership Program, mostly run by my organization, NIA. National Information Society Agency is a subsidiary organization under Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning. We have tried our best to its mission to develop Korea into an information-oriented society to reduce information gap between individuals both domestically and internationally as well. The activities we are doing globally aims for the SDG 2030s, and as well, it says countries have been good partners of us until now and ever. The first program I would like to introduce is Multilateral ICT Cooperation Program conducted by Korean governments. We provide consultation on developing countries' national ICT policy strategies, technical assistance like feasibility study, technical review also done by Korean governments, joint research with other international organizations like World Bank, IDB, FDB, and Asian Development also has been done. And also knowledge sharing program like joint seminars, conference with other organizations. Mostly it is conducted by demand basis. Once there is a demand from the multilateral bank or international organization, we cooperatively join the project and provide service for their needs. Second is the Korea IT Learning Program. The KOICA is also provides other areas of knowledge sharing program as well. But here in NRA, we provide knowledge sharing program in the area of e-government and ICT. This is a program the Korea government invites the policymaker, public officers, and experts in ICT field from developing countries to share our developing experience, e-government, and ICT. This program lasts for 1 or 2 weeks, and all expenses like airfare, accommodation, and per diem, etc., are all covered by Korean governments. So it's pretty much good chance to learn Korea ICT development. And more than 4,000 participants from 127 countries were participated. Some programs are jointly designed with international organizations, and we also have this conference, this workshop with emphasis on e-government and ICT jointly organized by UNPOG, UN Project Group of Governments in Seoul in 2015. The third one is the E-Government Cooperation Center, which is bilateral cooperation program runs for 3 years of duration. Korea and the counterpart country are contribute to $1 million each in cash or in kinds as well for establishment of their center. Usually, the Korea contributes in cash and the counterpart country contributes in kind, such as facilitating office, surrounding, and supporting local working staffs. We also dispatch a government officer and advisor to the counterpart country to help the counterpart country's e-government development. This site operates as a local window for bridging the Korea and the counterpart country joint project. Those projects can be any types of cooperation according to their counterpart country's demands. Sometimes it can be the joint projects, human resource exchange, or seminar as well. Currently, the Indonesian center is run in Jakarta, and we also set up a new center in Kenya, Peru this year. The first one is the Information Access Center, similar to Internet Cafe. This is a type of ODA project that we built an Internet Access Center in digitally remote area in beneficiary country. It consists of the interactive lab, video conference room, and training facility, and so on. Though this size, local IT learning program is provided, person who live in digitally remote area can have better access to internet. More than 50 IACs have built in worldwide, and we will open new center in Peru, Serbia, Paraguay, and Jordan this year. During vacation, we also dispatch Korean college students as volunteers for helping local people raise their IT awareness and IT literacy as well. I have some more slides left, but I will stop here because the main theme of my presentation pretty delivered enough. So remains are loaded on the web. Please refer to it later on. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Hanjin. Very interesting, actually. The model for competency in ICT is extremely useful, particularly in those situations where there's a perception that IT is peculiar to just technical people. It's important in advancing all of the SDGs as well as improving government generally that that all persons are able to understand and to utilize technology in an optimal way. And I think the competency assessment model is a very interesting one, which I think the SIDS countries would find useful in their journey to their e-government journeys. Before we close out the panel, I'd like to invite, with your indulgence, to provide a very brief presentation, Mr. Joshua Chambers from Gov Insider, an NGO in Singapore. Thank you. He's not on the program, but it's his case studies, I think, are definitely of interest to the SIDS countries in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's a huge honour to be presenting alongside such a distinguished chair and distinguished speakers, and indeed to this audience this morning. Could we bring up my slides, please? Thank you. So my organisation is called Gov Insider. It's a site that interviews senior government officials across Asia Pacific. The focus is to find things that work that other governments can take and use immediately within their own system. So this morning, I'm going to present some case studies to you very briefly on how governments have improved the quality of their data, used this data to improve the efficiency of their services, and indeed engaged citizens better in the policy-making process. So first, to talk about improving the quality of data. As I understand it with some SIDS, there is an issue that perhaps the data isn't most accurate. It's sometimes hard to find where either there are bottlenecks within a system or where there are areas of need, and this is particularly true perhaps of rural communities or different parts of the community who aren't necessarily best engaged by government. So some governments around the world have adapted by building feedback apps and offices which create data because citizens are actively telling you where the problems are within the systems. Very effective examples across Asia Pacific include, of course, one service in Singapore. It's probably the leader, the exemplar, but others include Clue in Jakarta. This is a system where in the city of Jakarta, if there is flooding, if there is problem with transportation, if there is a problem with cleanliness of the streets, or even if someone has a problem with a particular public service, they can use this app to raise the problem. It goes straight to the government of Jakarta and then is fed to that particular ministry. What's particularly powerful about this app is that it's got a dashboard to track first where the problems are in different ministries within the government, but secondly, how quickly government ministries are responding. So within Jakarta, the governor has a dashboard where he can see, using a traffic light scale, red, amber, green, which agencies are responding quickly to citizen feedback and which are slow. And actually the governor is prone, when there is an agency that pops up as red, calling up on the cell phone of the person who runs that ministry and says, why are you red on my dashboard? Why aren't you responding to complaints quickly enough? But this doesn't have to be an app. In the Philippines, they have brought in a simple telephone line where people can raise these concerns. In the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, they have a phone line and an app. And indeed, as we heard yesterday, the Phones Against Corruption project in Papua New Guinea shows the potential of SMS messaging for this as well. So it's not really about the technology or building an app, but it's about saying if you require data and you don't have it, ask citizens for it, because they will actually be providing it. A second way you can gather data is through social media. So this is another case study from Jakarta, but there was, and there remains in many times, great flooding within Jakarta that the government struggles to respond to, but they can't find where the flooding is worse to respond quickly enough. So this tool has been built, Petas Bencana, which gathers all of the mentions on Twitter, which is Indonesia's favorite social network, all of the mentions of flooding. And because on Twitter it shows where the person is, where they've sent the tweet, it can show in real time where people are talking about flooding, where they're taking photographs of the flooding of their houses. And so it's built, you can see very small here, an interactive map, which again goes into the governor's office, into the smart city unit of Jakarta, showing in real time where there is flooding and how they can respond. Now, because that's going into the centre of government, it means that the governor's team can then direct the emergency services, he can direct others there to immediately send aid and to provide support, whereas previously that would need people on the ground going down to do inspections, which would take at least 24 hours. So second, you're gathering this data, you have more real-time data on citizens, and again I would note that these sorts of things are really quite easy to set up, they don't require a great amount of investment. A way you can use your data, we can learn from the Philippines, which is prone to natural disasters, particularly typhoons. So the Philippines, working with the Red Cross, has built a system using quite rudimentary artificial intelligence that pulls in weather data, wind speeds, rainfall, and the data on past natural disasters within the Philippines. And this tool that's built by the Netherlands Red Cross means that when they know that there's a disaster coming, they can pull in this data and they have really quite accurate predictions of which areas are going to be worst hit. Now, in the Philippines previously, to do disaster assessment, they had to send people down, but the Red Cross has used this tool with quite an astonishing level of accuracy to say, we know there's going to be people in problem in this area, let's send people down already. And it's really shortening that time. Now, what's interesting about this is it's built by a non-profit, and indeed they're expanding as well, and I believe they're looking for more places to support with this project, so it'd be well worth contacting the Netherlands Red Cross about that. Similarly, the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region has slashed public sector costs by using this data. So they had both a phone line and an app. When they looked at the phone line data, they found that one department was getting a massive number of complaints, and that was for one particular thing. It was to do with student loan repayments. And when they spoke to people who complained after looking at this data and they looked at it, they found that actually the problem was they'd been sending out a letter that was quite unclear. It didn't say whether you were supposed to pay money back or whether you were due to be paid money. It was quite unclear in how it had been written. It was very, very long pages of this, and people in Hong Kong had become quite confused by it. So, by looking at this data, they knew they needed to rewrite this letter. It turned out the letter actually was because the government owed people money. So by rewriting this letter, they were able to make this process much more efficient, and in 1 year they cut complaints to the government by 47%. That's because they found that there was this one problem that was causing a massive amount of harm within the society, and because they had the data, they could respond very easily to it. And third, I'm going to talk about how you can engage citizens and how you can work with them on different things, particularly to do with the environment. So a great case study on this is in India. A couple of years ago, 2014, the Prime Minister walked outside of his official house, picked up a broom and started sweeping the streets. And tens of thousands of people across the city of New Delhi joined in as part of the Clean India campaign. This, I think, is probably the best example of how government has used social media to galvanize people and to spread a message. So what did they do? Well, they decided on a set day that people, government officials, politicians, but also they asked celebrities, they asked sports figures to join in, would go outside and they would pose, sweeping the streets with a broom and use the hashtag Clean India, which would be used on all of the social networks. Now, by doing this and having influencers and also forcing the government officials to go out and do it as well, they had enough of a mass that other people started doing this as well. It became a bit like the ice bucket challenge, a trend where everyone wants to be taking part in this. And so first, people are actually outside sweeping the streets, which is quite a good thing in itself. But secondly, they're spreading that message, which was very important to the Indian government as a whole, that government can't solely be responsible for keeping this city clean. We require citizens to be engaged and to be joining in on this as well. And just by using social media to spread that story and using social media at its best, allowing people to share their own stories, it became a very effective way of launching a new government campaign. Just going to finish up by talking about how to reach rural communities, because there's a great case study in Bhutan. Bhutan, an isolated and quite small country with a lot of mountainous regions where people tend not to have access to basic medications and other things, but also can become quite isolated from the work of government. So in Bhutan, what they did is they have put in the local village centres just some webcams, which will beam in with, the picture here actually shows the Prime Minister talking to a local group, but MPs, Member of Parliament, ministers, so that on a weekly basis they can hold a digital town hall where the people in the local community are able to gather together and talk with their representatives in the central government. It's a great way of using simple technology to create an event out of engagement and to get people involved, and it ensures that these people who otherwise were a little bit isolated from the work of government are able to share their voice and in real time say, these are the problems that are affecting us. So finally, some broader lessons for global leaders that we've found on GovInsider. First, it's always best to use what's worked elsewhere. There are fantastic exemplars, of course, on the stage this morning. Sim has done wonderful work on sharing data across government agencies. Singapore has fantastic apps and services. South Korea has a brilliant program of open data. There are all sorts of projects that can be learned from. So often it's best just to look around and to take that and to put it within a government directly rather than reinventing the wheel. With feedback apps, a key thing to note is that they do need a quick response. If you don't respond when people are giving that feedback, actually it will cause more problems for the government first, and secondly, it's not really in the spirit of the venture to take that data and not to be telling people you're going to respond and when you're going to respond by. Thirdly, if you're gathering this data, it's useful to open it up. For example, it can be used for transportation apps. So in Jakarta, transport data is now shared with the private sector. Taxi apps, bus apps can now see where there is gridlock on the streets and they can get to their journeys quicker. But another one actually in tourism is often food data, which isn't thought about so much. But if you think of certifications of restaurants, where is safe to eat, where's not safe to eat, this is fundamentally useful data for hotels to be having, and government doesn't necessarily open this up that often. Two final points. The success of the Clean India programme came about because it was a very personal thing. The Prime Minister wrote in the first person join me in doing that. He was setting out a message. Another Prime Minister who's very good at social media is Singapore's Prime Minister, again, has very personal messaging. He'll walk around the city and take photographs, just showing where he is. It's about engaging with people in a very personable way, rather than using that more official voice of His Excellency was meeting with this group this morning. That would be more of an update of somebody's diary than a conversation with people. And finally, you can build a brand by doing this as well, and it doesn't just have to be prime ministers. Actually, in many countries, permanent secretaries, government officials, city mayors have also used this to build their own community of influence, and often it means that there are great synergies that they weren't aware of that have come about as well. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been a great honour to address you all.
Thank you very much, Joshua. We've had a very, very interesting set of presentations this morning, and I believe that the important message that came across, whether due to the absence of approach or proactive approaches, is that ICTs really are the platform, the bedrock, the enabler for society in today's world. It's important because the younger persons only tend to operate using this type of technology. So they expect their governments to be able to deliver and provide the services that they can get from the private sector. I think in all of the presentations, or at least 3 of them, I distinctly recall a mention of using mobile apps. Everybody has mobile phones, just about everybody has mobile phones. Making the efficiencies available to the general citizenry improves government services and improves the interaction that citizens have with government. And certainly it's something that I believe I certainly endorse, but it's something that is important for SIDS to recognize and to take the best advantage of, because it can move you along the trajectory for development fairly quickly, and it has the innate abilities that support the type of institutional arrangements that will make the SDGs a success, such as the policy coherence, the transparency aspects, process integration, accountability, and most importantly, participatory and inclusive governance. With that, again, I'd like to thank the panelists and open the questions, open up for questions from the floor in respect to the presentations that were presented. Thank you very much. Cuba. Thank you very much, the delegate from Cuba.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Good morning, colleagues. Let me first commend the presentation made by the panelists that were very inspiring and very good presentation. My intervention is to put in fact what we are discussing here. Around the world, we are more or less 7-something billion persons. And persons living in developing countries are around 6 billion. And I would like to use some of the data provided by the ITU about ICT when we review the 10 years of the World Summit on Information Society. In the General Assembly, we made a review about that. And the ITU provides some very interesting data about the reality of the ICT around the world. For example, the ITU said that in 2014, 2.3 billion of mobile broadcast subscription exists in the world, 2.3 billions. And to developing countries were around 55% of those 3 billion. So very simple, in developing countries, developing no seats, there were around 1-point-something billion of mobile broadcast subscription. And we live in developing countries, 6 billion of people. This is one important data to have to take into account. About the internet connectivity and user in developing countries were 219 billion of people from 6 billion of people that are living in developing countries. About seats, for example, fixed telephony in 6, there is just 12 people over 100 inhabitants. So a little bit more than the 10% of the people living in cities have a fixed telephony. And let me continue a little bit. Fixed broadband, 6/100 people living in cities. Mobile broadband, 24/100 inhabitants in cities have a mobile broadband access. So it's very simple, my question to the panelists, because what they express in their country that are represented, perhaps the reality is very different for the reality of the rest of the seats that are here. And for example, I would like to use another interesting document that were provided by the UNTAD and was referring to the foreign direct investment flow for seats. In 2014, were about 7 billion of US dollar, but 72% of those investment were to Mauritius, the Bahamas, Jamaica, and TNT. So for the rest of the seats that are here, the foreign direct investment were around 28%. So very simple. 7 billion, the 28% of the 7 billion, you know, made the math that is very simple. So, and everybody here knows that if you can access, or if you can have access to the ICTs, you need the resources, you need the technology, you need a lot of issues to create the infrastructure, to guarantee the access to those people living in cities to have access to this kind of technology. I'm not talking about just internet access. I'm talking about have fixed line. I'm talking about telephone. So the data, the numbers are very, 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 you know, eloquent. So how much do we need, and how much will it take to sit to get in the stage where there are Singapore, where there are South Korea, when there are other countries? You know, so this is what we need to discuss here. They were also talking about the issue of cybersecurity. I was, on behalf of Cuba, the one who negotiated in the General Assembly in 2015 the document. And when we talk about cybersecurity, there were three countries of the United Nations that say, here we don't need to discuss cybersecurity. I won't say the name of the country because it is not necessary. But three of them said, okay, here we don't need to discuss cybersecurity because it is not relevant. There were a lot of countries, a lot of developing countries say this is relevant, cybersecurity. But three of them say, okay, we don't care about that and this is not the place. And we didn't discuss that because three of them didn't allow us to discuss the implication of cybersecurity for seats or for ICT or development in the ICT because they are very relevant. So my point is very simple. If we don't discuss here how we can change the internet governance, will be very difficult to allow seats, you know, the more very difficult countries to access to ICT. If we don't discuss here how we can create at the international level a mechanism to allow transfer of technology in preference term to seats, will be very difficult to get to the issues that were presented, that were very good presented by the panelists, because we want everything, everybody here wants to get where there are those countries. But where is, you know, the technology? Where is the capacity building that we need? And where are the technologies that are relevant for our countries? Because the technology perhaps for Cuba is not the same technology for that need perhaps other countries here, because there are the circumstances in Cuba are very difficult to the circumstances in other countries here, for the infrastructure, for the condition, for how they are, positioning in the world, in the geography. So how we can discuss here, we need to discuss here how the people who are owner for the patents could give these patents to us, to seats, to allow us to implement sustainable development. Otherwise, believe me, it will be very difficult to get to 2030 with those important issues. The difference between this agenda, I'm going to finish. The difference between 2030 agenda and MDGs were, for example, that this agenda is universal right, but is more ambitious than the MDGs. And the international resources to implement this agenda have to be proportioned in this ambition to the MDGs goals, to the SDGs targets and indicators. Without that, believe me, Madam Coordinator, I'm sorry for taking too long, will be very difficult to get in 2030 where those people are in this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that intervention. Whilst recognizing that there are these challenges, I think the importance of a gathering of this nature is that we can discuss those and perhaps look at ways to address the challenges, the particular challenges that SIDS would face, notwithstanding where Korea and Estonia and others have been. The technology is becoming more available. But I do take the point with respect to the discussion, which I know is taking place in other fora with respect to internet governance. Are there any other questions? I wanted to take them as a group and then come back to the panel. Thank you. Trinidad, correct? Right. Delegate from Trinidad.
Good morning, all. Truly excellent presentations. Nothing more needs to be said about that. One question and one comment. I hear you, Cuba. One of the things that Trinidad and Tobago did, we cried out, and I know it's not a grant, so we approached the IDB. So it was a loan, but what we were recently able to launch was our Global Services Promotion Program, and it's really about assisting us with the capacity building that we need. We recognize that if we were going to be a stronger player in this IT-enabled sector, we needed greater capacity. So they have come on board to support us. And it's been done in an interesting way, actually. We are soon to put out a call for proposals. So it's a number of things. One of the things is we're putting out there a call for proposals. So business persons, entrepreneurs will then create a proposal in order to be able to access the funding to build capacity within their own organizations. So it's not just the government saying, here, this is it, take money, do whatever you need. You've got to show how you need this and how it's going to build and further support your business. So it's one approach that we are looking at. And of course, we are saying, come invest with us, come, just come. And I'm saying to all of you, come. We are open, Carnival is happening. So that's the comment. The question is this. I wasn't too sure I understood one point you were making, Dr. Wells, when you suggested that we protect our data by making good use of our embassies all over the world. Were you referring to our physical embassies, or are we talking about using cloud data, cloud capacity to protect our data, and you're just calling it embassies because it's not at home? Trust me, I am not IT anything, so make it simple for me, yes? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Yes, Kiribati.
No, it's Maldives.
Sorry? Maldives, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. We would like to share some of our initiatives, how we have tried to overcome in Maldives, how we have tried to overcome some challenges we faced with ICT. We have interventions made in the banking sector where we are trying to reach the far-off islands where we have developed mobile applications, and we are encouraging people to use the application for transit, for transfers. And also we have a mobile boat that goes around, which has a schedule and then goes around the islands to make transitions, because it's usually in the faraway islands, there's just women and old people left behind. So men are usually working away from the island. So these transactions, they go to their house, and then the team from the bank goes to their house and have this contract, have these transactions made. And the other initiative is also we are doing e-government, where we can apply for many services and token numbers are issued through using apps and online services as well. Then the other area we are working on is tracking the children. We are having an issue with high school dropouts in boys. So we are trying to understand why there is such a high dropout in boys, especially in the rural area. So one thing we figured out was they were dropping out from the local school and getting transferred to a bigger school in a more urban area. So that was not tracked because the child was not tracked from a number or unique number. They didn't know that it was the same child that was being transferred. So we're trying to sort that out now, and each child is being tracked in the schools. And every day the teachers has to report. They have a platform, a portal where from the class they enter who is absent and who is not. And the ministry is following each child and making measures into and interventions to identify when the child is absent from school for more than 3 days. So, and also one of the challenges for the education sector was when the government decided that all teachers need to have a bachelor's degree, and they had about 5 years or 6 years to do that. They gave a grace period. But the issue was we don't have many teachers. We cannot send them off to uni. They are living in rural areas. How do we solve the problem? So we had something similar like the Bhutan, where teacher resource centers were set up. And from the university, they had sessions during the weekends, and some nights where the teachers who are already on the job, they could come for sessions and have interaction sessions. And they are almost at the final stages of completing. There was about 500 over teachers who had gone through this program, and that was a great initiative because they could work and then have their studies completed as well. And we are also working on telemedicine, but it still has to gain momentum and people's confidence in it. So these are some initiatives we are taking on. And also we have developed some apps to report. Male, the capital, is very congested. And if there's a roadblock, then the whole system comes to a standstill. So we have developed some apps where you can report and updates on roadblocks are there, and then you could report like garbage, trash being left, and also traffic conditions and things. So that has gained momentum, and people are using that very well, and it's appreciated. So I just wanted to share that with us. And we have a very high mobile penetration rate, and we have internet in all inhabited islands. So we should make the best of that and make the citizens more engaged. We are still developing more initiatives, but these are things we are doing now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I would like to do now is bring it back to my panel to respond to the comments, I guess, and also the questions that were raised. Sim?
I'll be happy to start with a few. First of all, based on the Cuban colleagues' comments, just perhaps sharing where we started from in a way. So when we started building up digital government, I don't think we were in Estonia at least, not that much different position. At maximum, 15 and 20% of people were online, having access to internet at home or workplace really. So, but what we realize is that if we don't start on this front while we are building up the infrastructure, I mean, we realize that we might lose the first users because they just exactly, you know, if we don't deliver for them, the critical mass is already there. We're basically missing out on opportunity. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that I hear you on this sort of challenge, and I think the trouble here for the policy side is that how to move different sort of tracks at once. Building up the infrastructure, building up skills for use as well. For us, that was even more important than the infrastructure part. Market took care very much of the infrastructure. And last, and exactly using then these sort of momentums to really sort of move our services as a government and build up the platforms for the services so that there would be use of this infrastructure. I think my only second comment goes to the Trinidad's question in a way, and I'm sure exactly Mr. Wells will sort of compliment me, but the reason why I'm speaking is that we are building up something very similar to the embassy, or let's say the digital embassy program of Bahamas. And we actually even call it data embassies for the same reason. What we do is that we build up, using cloud technology, backup sites for both systems and data in either our embassies or friendly government facilities, not private cloud. So not private cloud providers for that reason, but that's really for the reason that the same, I guess, motivation that in the Bahamas, that we want to make sure that the data we preserve outside is fully not just interfered, but also under Estonian jurisdiction, legally speaking. So our data protection rules and laws and stuff like that would apply to the data that we keep outside. And so yes, we are entering with that into a novel territory of how to pull that off legally, how to create an international law, this sort of framework. And yeah, in that reason, yeah, we are very eager to work with the Bahamas and others on how to fix that out, figure that out.
Thank you very much, Hanjin. Yes.
Yeah, so the Cuban delegation, the comments is very interesting, and I think that, like as Shunya says, that Korea situation when we first start our district government, our situation is not that different. Like statistics is like that. In 1953, Korea GDP is only 67, and now it became like the $28,000. So it's tremendous increase, and we at the moment we were the donated countries, like we get the older the international organization aid from and now we became the donor of those kind of ODA things. So the reason that we just rapidly developed our district government is that there is some high-level commitments that the moment rate 1990 is that we just the high-level commitments is that we are behind of industrialism, but we can be more ahead of the digitalism. So we invested a lot in infrastructure things, and over the government first starts the raise of the old infrastructure things, and then the private sector follows. So so I just want to emphasize that you just start from the high-level commitments on digital development, and also you have to make the close relationship with the private sector, as will be our just lesson learned from our experience.
Thank you, Hanjin. Dorcas.
Just like Estonia as Korea, we also gone through a series of development where Singapore, as I mentioned to you, way back in the 1980s, that we are relatively paper-based. We also go through developments where we are lacking behind. But we, as a government, we realize that if we do not invest in ICT infrastructure, we will be lacking behind as a society, as a nation. Some of the programs I understand from the Singapore Cooperative Enterprise that I mentioned earlier, they actually helped Philippines in the areas of putting in place a TV white space so that people in the rural areas actually have internet connectivity. We are happy to actually help some of the countries if you want to look into some of these areas of assistance that is required. Thank you.
Very much. Dr. Wells?
Yes, in response to the comment made by the Cuban delegation on cybercrime, I believe it's a very important conversation for SIDS to have. I totally agree. I believe that a good starting point for SIDS should be the Budapest Convention. It's a treaty that really is the first treaty first international treaty seeking to address internet and computer crime by harmonizing national laws, improving investigative techniques, and increasing cooperation amongst nations. The Budapest Convention was founded in 2001, I believe, Council of Europe. And this region in and of itself only have, I believe, one country that is really signed on to the Budapest Convention. This is extremely needed in order to really fight cybercrime on any meaningful way. Laws and international cooperation needs to be enhanced. The conversation is, in fact, needed. The response from the Trinidadian delegation as related to the protection of data in embassies, I think is twofold. Sovereign data, in many respects, governments are still apprehensive about the cloud technologies. the adoption rate from government is still slow. There are many governments, I believe, in this region, Trinidad being one of them, are now starting to take bold steps to cloud computing. There are concerns, personable and identifiable information being on the cloud. When you talk about sovereign government data, data that impacts national security on any level, there needs to be a conversation as to whether you would want that information in the cloud. The physical implementation of ICT infrastructures at physical embassies abroad assist with the disaster recovery component of any government. And my colleague from Estonia indicated that the approach that they're taking, and I believe that it's the right approach to take, simply because embassies are sovereign to that country, and the building of data in those infrastructures in those embassies still will allow the resiliency of information if there's a natural disaster or some form of disaster in the production side, meaning the actual country. So it's important to consider both cloud and the embassies, but be careful with the cloud and what you put there because of the adoption rate and the security. I know that the cloud computing, many of the major ones have started to become standardized and in the use of secure technology. So it's not where it's open. You just need to recognize some of the issues with it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wells. I'd like to see whether we have any further intervention from the floor. I see two. SAMOA, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mine is not a question, it's just some reflections. I think when it comes to the ICT, Sam West was very much a latecomer, but at the end of the day, we are consumers and retailers and beneficiaries of ICT. Too often we complain by not being at the top of the line, but I think it's also important that you can be at the back of the queue. Why? Because it allows you to prioritize your on what to acquire. And I think it's also important because it allows you to try and get the technology that is appropriate, relevant, and more importantly, that is also affordable. I've listened very carefully to the presentations, and I think it's really important because for me, for the last 2 days, and this is the final day, I'm here looking for solutions. Yes. I'm here to borrow, I'm here to beg, and I'm even here to steal some of the solutions. And in fact, I've got a package full of it, and I'm going to share it with my Prime Minister. That's how serious we are, because I think amongst us, we have a fair idea of what the challenges that continue to confront us, and amongst ourselves too. That is our comfort zone. But it's really enlightening and refreshing to hear some of these things that are happening and that are working. Because at the end of the day, I come back to what I said previously. We all learn from borrowed knowledge. It's just that we need to adapt them, and we try, and I even go further and said we need to SAMOanize it so that it fits our situation and we can benefit from it. In my own household, my younger daughter, she's more computer savvy than me, and she's the one who basically teaches me. And silently, I'm jealous of her because she knows a lot more than me, and I think that's also the relationship we have now. But the fact that my own government is investing heavily on ICT means it's an important enough tool to allow us to try and achieve some of the 2030 agenda, the SDGs, and the SAMOA pathway. I thank you.
I did see another flag on the left. Sorry, do we have another intervention? No? Okay. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay, which was first? Okay, sorry. Thank you. We have an intervention from the floor itself. I'll go to the right first, only because I'm following the gender bias, which I will correct next time around. Thank you.
Thank you. Along with that, there's a huge generational gap within the civil service in the Bahamas, meaning a lot of the older generations are not in tune as well as acceptable of changing the way the systems are run and to incorporate e-technologies. Therefore, that's creating a great societal hindrance on our growth and our capabilities to not only integrate important systems in the Bahamas for economic and environmental growth, but also integrate ourselves with the world on a global scale. So my question to the panelists, as well as to any of the delegates, is how do you combat that resistance of attitude within the society, as well as within the governmental ministries, as well as how you sustain these e-systems on a general board across the system? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Another intervention?
Thank you, Chair. Gerard Alling, Inter-American Development Bank. And it's a question really for Estonia. You described how you transformed government, but it would be useful if you could provide a little more details. You mentioned capacity building and sharing solutions. And I think for a number of countries, there are different stages of development in terms of their ICT. If you could provide a little more details, and also in terms of cost, if you have been able to estimate how much it costed you from going from where you were to where you are presently. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those very interesting questions, very timely as well. Are there any other questions specifically from the delegates? Yes, I'm sorry, I can't see all the way. I do see.
Thank you
I do
very much, Malta.
recognize.
Thank you very much. As a small island country, let me share a bit of our experience. Malta has advanced considerably in ICT. It has become, it's cited as an example, but it all happened in 15 years. And part of this reason, and a question I think from Bahamas was in this direction, part of this reason how we managed to attract, to bridge this divide in society, was actually the decision to establish what we called the digital outreach. And this was eSkills Alliance Malta, where we it was a convergence between the ICT industry of the country, the academia, and the government. And this contributed a lot, to the extent that now we have over 100% with mobile phones and computers accessibility at home. This was coupled with the complete e-digitalization of the schools, where it was expensive, it was imported because we don't produce this, but all state schools have today are equipped with the latest generation, including whiteboards, interactive whiteboards, and so on and so forth. And this in turn then created a competition with private schools and so on and so forth. But the point which I really wish to make is that this all happened very, very fast. And I remember myself, I remember my mother, who's 85 years old, going to school late in the evening, in the afternoons, for courses to be able to access. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are running a little bit over time in terms of the start of our break. What I would do is questions, and the questions are specifically pointed to Sim. I don't know if there are any other questions or comments from the floor, because what I intended to do is to have the panel give some final comments, which would allow us then an opportunity to have our break and kind of move back in time. What I wanted to add here also is in relation to some of the issues regarding accessibility and connectivity raised by the delegate from Cuba. The second roundtable will be looking at leaving no one behind. And I believe that there will be a greater in-depth discussion on the issue of how we ensure that everybody, through the use of ICTs, mobilizing ICT resources, are able to take advantage and to be a part of the move towards the 2030 agenda, every citizen. Okay, sorry, Sim, if I could just ask you to
So, as a
short and wrap up.
as I must be short, and I don't think I can answer that long as you wanted me to. But just the short that said, if anyone wants me to go deeper, find me online and grab me by the button. I'll address the cost issue because that's a short answer. Our experience has been that building up a good working digital government does not have to cost much. We have invested regularly about 1% of our annual budget, state budget, into IT, all things IT, manpower, hardware, software development, maintenance, the whole thing. So I guess you can make a sort of equivalent in your heads. What would that mean in your context? For us, that today, 2017, means about 90 million euros a year. Compared to, for example, many of our European colleagues, that's tiny. But that's exactly because we have been able to put out a government as a platform approach, where many of the cost issues we actually built up jointly, centrally, and then share across the government. That takes the individual costs of the projects down, which otherwise would be, going up by silos. And my last point, briefly, is that, and my wrap-up message in a way is that basically echoing the someone spirit is that, yeah, let's steal a lot. That's how we started building our digital government, really. I mentioned digital ID as one of the building blocks and sort of bedrocks of Estonian digital government. We took that from Finland. We only added one in innovation. We made it mandatory, and that made it work. But the whole point is this, that if there's something that works, and this was, I guess, my message in my talk as well, that if there's something that works, let's share. If it's code, even that. But mostly it's not code. Mostly it's the experience and the policy know-how that then needs to be implemented domestically. And I think this is exactly what I was saying, that the way we see it, the way we have been proposing it also in UN level, is that we think that there should be way more sort of investment into this part of capacity building, all the way to top politicians even. So yes, more sharing.
Thank you very much. And you?
Yeah, it's great comments from Estonia. I think it's great. Yeah, his opinion is right. Totally agree on what he says, and also that I want to wrap up my speech is that I think it's ICT. We all agree that the ICT is not whether we use or not. So recently we just have been facing the big tremendous change in ICT as well, like cloud computing, big data, and machine learning, AI. All those kinds of things can brought you the big tremendous the chance to change your country. So just learn from other countries what they done, and also just starts, and then you can have some changes. Okay.
Thank you. Lucas?
Just want to say that capability building is a continuous process. Even in countries like Singapore, we also continue to upgrade and invest in education to educate not just people who are developers or coders, but to educate the policy makers to understand what's the potential use of ICT. So this is something that I think it cuts across both developing as well as developed countries, people who are advanced in digital government, and something that we need to continue to do, even though we have reached certain stages.
Dr. Wells?
I want to wrap up by answering my Bahamian friend who asked the question, how to combat the resistance to attitude, I think, or the resistance to change, and how to combat that attitude. I think it's important for us to realize that the adoption of any information system, the only way we could successfully adopt information system is if we engage in significant training and awareness. That's the only way. So we would resist what we don't know. And if we train our populace on what we offer, and I believe that resistance will significantly decrease. The other question is how to sustain e-government systems. And this goes at the heart of what I believe needs to take place in the Bahamas. I take note of the stealing comments, and I think that we should steal the concept from Estonia on X Road, because that significantly saves, that will significantly save our government a lot of money, and because it allows, or it do away with the silos of government system. You write once, you read many times, And as a result of that, the data would be more cleaner, and that goes towards our e-government strategy. If we ensure that these systems are talking to each other, then the e-government strategy would be much more easier sustained. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wells. I think it's rather interesting. I tend to get extremely excited when we come to discuss the issue of ICTs as an enabler for advancing development agendas. And part of that is because I can't remember, I think SAMOA may have put it, it talks about solutions. It talks about practical ways of tackling the issues that we face. It's really two parts to it. There's the information and the data, which is extremely valuable in assisting in planning, and there are different ways and quite cheap ways, inexpensive ways for persons to assist government with this exercise, with the data that government needs in order to be able to be more responsive and relevant to the requirements of the citizenry. The second component really is the tools that are available. And I believe that the key there is the sharing, and perhaps even the delegate from Samoa indicated, the stealing, the ability of not having to reinvent the wheel. There are many countries who have gone through this exercise, and there's a lot to be gained from their experiences, because the points at which they started are not too dissimilar to the points where many SIDS are. Learning from them would certainly help in many ways. In addition, as we move to more open source availability of technology, that helps as well. I think one of the hallmarks in this area that's been extremely useful has been the e-government survey that's produced by NLE, by the United Nations, that gives a very good gauge of where countries are headed, what needs to be done, what the expectations are. Many countries, I think, use it essentially as a marketing tool, but its real value comes from understanding what the potential and the possibilities are, and where these things are happening, and where there may be similarities, and where there may be areas to co-partner with other countries in terms of moving the agenda forward. The biggest driver, however, unquestionably, and that came out so strongly, the countries that are most successful in leveraging and deploying ICTs to move their development and economic growth and agendas along are the ones where you see committed and dedicated leadership at the policy level to say this is going to happen. Where that does not occur, there will be issues, there will be competition, there will be fragmentation, which fragmentation in ICT is almost as frustrating as fragmentation in an offline environment. So I think the key message that I would have gained from this today is that it is a journey. There are lots of potential opportunities out there that can assist SIDS in moving forward. SIDS, I think, the SIDS countries as a group fall lower down the rankings in terms of the biennial e-government surveys, but there are opportunities to partner. However, in order for it to succeed, at the end of the day, it's the people internally within the country and their willingness to understand that ICT brings together all of the bits and pieces so that everybody is actually moving in the same direction. Without that, then there will continue to be issues. It also provides very reasonable avenues and very reasonable vehicles for engagement. The best way to respond to people's needs is to truly understand what their needs are. And the only way that can happen is to listen to what it is they have to say, hear their feedback. And ICTs and I think this was demonstrated quite admirably by the case studies presented by Joshua Chambers. It's setting up a call center or setting up a center that remotely that politicians or policymakers or even government officials can interact with the citizenry. They can hear what is happening. They can hear what is being planned. They can hear what is being proposed, and they can give their views. Those are very simple means, but those are important means. Otherwise, the question arises at the end of the day, is government policy really responding to the needs of the people? And can we get an agenda as ambitious as the SDGs and the Samoa pathway on the right trajectory if we don't have all of the cogs and all of the wheels, as it were, aligned so that they're singing from the same hymn sheet. And ICT definitely, our world is electronic, notwithstanding the need for greater accessibility in some of the CID's country. Our world is very much electronic. The younger people demonstrate that over and repeatedly. And the more that governments can come on board and create the platform for this to happen, this interaction to happen, and to take advantage of the data and information that comes from these platforms to assist in planning, then I think the better off we will be in achieving the SDG agenda. I thank you. I thank my panelists for the first roundtable. We have, our break was supposed to be from 10:45 until 11:15. We probably can go until 11:20. Is that good? 11, it doesn't take very long. I think the coffee is close by. When we come back, we will start with the panel at the roundtable 2, which will be looking at more private sector involvement in ensuring that no one is left behind. Thank you very much.